Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and a tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video view series. Take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the mini-adventure Oddities and Odysseys, the Knight Fiend of Ravenloft, designed by Kerry Jordan for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Knight Fiend of Ravenloft is a mini adventure, almost an encounter. It's very, very short, only a little over a dozen pages. And obviously, by the Ravenloft in the title, you know that it would fit perfectly within Curse of Strahd or any other Ravenloft setting. But you don't necessarily have to have it there. You could just include it as a mini adventure / encounter that's got a horror theme, basically. This one, there is an Oni who is kidnapping children, but the Oni was killed by another hero, Lady Wigand. However, the two kind of died together, and because of the mystical, ness of Ravenloft, they are cursed with fighting each other for all eternity. However, the Oni, known as the Knight Fiend here, has been able to draw power from the land, and whenever the night is at its darkest, when there's no moon out, he's able to gain more powers and can actually form into a more corporeal body and go on hunt down children again like he does, and Lady Wigand is not able to stop him. And this is where the PCs come into play. So it could basically happen anywhere. It's got some information for inserting it into Curse of Strahd with a few adventure hook ideas to plop the players there, like in the village of Kresk, for example, or in any of the other encounters, or they can get the event from Morgantha. Basically, all these tie-ins are for Curse of Strahd. You don't have to use it in Curse of Strahd, though, but it is thematically appropriate for that campaign. And the players learn that the Oni has, or at least what we think, we're not even quite sure what it is. The designer does a pretty good job of having the quest-giving NPC, which is the mother. Her husband's been killed, the little girl's been kidnapped, not able to pinpoint what exactly this monster is, and that's relevant because the monster is kind of basically a ghost. It's partially, it can go into the ethereal realm, it can change its shape constantly, it's kind of got vestiges of its original Oni form, and it's got a custom stat block, and it's really fucking hard to kill. And the idea here is you're really not supposed to kill it until it kills you, and then you can kill it. Now that's a little bit of a monkey wrench there. So the players get this quest to go hunt down this creature. So it starts off kind of like a lot of quests do, help us go defeat this monster. And as the players go there and try to deal with it, as designed, this monster is supposed to TPK the party. Now, that's a tricky thing to pull off. A very, very tricky thing to pull off. I mean, obviously, players do not want to die. They don't want to be captured. They don't want to lose their agency. They will, I assume, do whatever they can in their power to not fall in this battle. And 5e makes it a little bit more difficult to kill off players because of the whole death saves thing, which means it would also make it more difficult to run a TPK encounter without it being kind of an agonizing situation of having players do nothing but roll death saves several turns if they're not being saved and popped back up or stabilized and whatnot. So it's a tricky situation because this creature, although powerful, a lot of his power comes from the fact that he's got all these resistances to normal means. And obviously he's got things like Cone of Cold, which would do a lot of damage to most players. And again, this is supposed to be for 3rd level. So pretty low level PCs that are not supposed to necessarily fight a CR7 creature. That being said, you never supposed to underestimate your players. So this is a very tricky situation for me to wrap my head around. I don't ever like the idea of capturing or killing the players without some kind of very specific gimmicks included in here, or ideally some kind of alternative to where if the players do their very best, they're able to escape, they're able to grab people and distract, maybe one person sacrifice himself. Like, what happens if you have all these scenarios? Do you just have a cinematic where, okay, well, the Night Fiend just hunts you all down in the end? It's a very tricky thing to pull off, and I don't think the the story necessarily does a good job of anticipating all the different routes that players can take. And it's a very short story. It's not designed for a bunch of choices to be made or anything. And the story only continues if the players fall in this battle. Now, it does mention that during the battle, as players fall down to 0 hit points, they will be stabilized, which means we can kind of skip the whole death saving throw thing. It does mention that other players aren't supposed to see her, but I would make that as obvious as possible. Once somebody first goes down to 0 hit points, I would have that lady appear. Everybody can see her. She stabilizes the person. And you really want to convey to the players that, hey, it's okay to fall. And not only that, but the story will continue if you fall down to 0 hit points, which they still might not get. So, I mean, it mentions this is a deadly encounter, and you should mention to the players this adventure is different from their usual adventures and ask them to reserve judgment until the end. That's not necessarily asking for, like, consent or permission. That's more like, please forgive me if you don't like this at the end. That's not a good solution necessarily. So I think there is a way you can do this, but it needed to be a little bit more information and anticipate a few more things the players could have done. And maybe only some of them are killed and the others are learning about, okay, hey, if you're able to go into the ghost realm, then you can defeat this creature, which might have been the other way to do this. Yes, you lose some of that impact of the players dying and then coming back as ghosts. But that way, if they maybe just learn about this fight they can't win, they escape, maybe they learn from somebody else, hey, if you enter the ethereal realm somehow, essentially become like ghosts, then you can defeat the monster. And that could have been a whole alternate solution to getting through it if they wanted to do that rather than, get killed. But assuming they die, which is, again, the correct way to continue this story, which is weird, then they are awakened as ghosts, basically ghosts of themselves. They see their bodies literally laying broken and destroyed. And this Lady Wigand, who previously destroyed the Oni, is the helpful NPC who kind of explains the situation and says, hey, this happened to me too. It happens to the best of us around here. I thought I killed him. I only killed his body. Our spirits remain. He's stronger than I can handle. If you could please go take him. And she doesn't actually even accompany the players. It's a bunch of like spirits that kind of approach, I guess, the players' bodies, and she has to kind of remain behind to defend their bodies while they go off. That's not necessarily bad, but you kind of just introduce this cool NPC and then immediately kind of lose her as the players then go defeat the Oni. Which, by the way, there is a MP3 that is included in here, which is kind of crazy. I've never seen that before, of this nursery rhyme you're seeing. If I can actually play it for you. I'll play like a few.
Lock the door, blow out the light. The hungry Oni haunts the night. Hide and tremble.
All right, so you get the gist of it there, but that's the creep. I mean, it's pretty cool. Right? It fits. It's the exact nursery rhyme you're seeing here, and you're supposed to play this as the players are waking up, which kind of dictates the whole Oni kidnapping children thing, and it's very, very Curse of Strahd / Ravenloft appropriate. So I thought that was actually a really cool addition. I haven't seen too many DM's Guild products, if any, that include musical accompaniments, and I would include that as like a big thing when that first started, and then as the players are still in this ghost mode, maybe turn it down to where it's like background music and just have it repeat over and over. That would be pretty creepy. So once the players talk to Lady Wigand and they basically tell her, I think they get the sword from her. Or no, that's right. They get the sword from the body. She's only got like a short sword. Her sword, which she used to actually kill the beast, is in the body, which they make it to the Knight Fiend's lair. He does have the child there, which that's something I didn't mention before. He had the child before, and that introduces an interesting quirk to the tactical battle in that because he still has the child in one arm, he's considered to have like half cover. And if the players do any AoE effects, the DM should remind the players that, hey, anything you do will also affect the child. So don't like hurling. I don't think they have fireballs yet, they're third level, but any kind of AoE effect could potentially harm the child. So that's an interesting side effect there. And that'll be part of their tactic here, is that he's still got the child, even though he's kind of half ghost form. But being a ghost, it gives them a bunch of new powers, including immunity to cold. So the Oni's Cone of Cold spell will no longer wipe them out like it probably did before. All of their ghost stats are explained here. Player characters as free spirits. And it says you can either have the players discover that on their own, which could be interesting. You could have Lady Wigand explain some of it, or you can give them a handout which includes all this information at the very end. It's kind of cheekily written, which is funny. It's not necessarily what I would think of as fitting the theme, but whatever, it's fine to have a handout, I think. You gain flight, you gain resistances, immunities, dark vision. You can move and see into the ethereal plane, which is how the Oni was able to kind of teleport around. So basically, it's an interesting exercise in you're gonna fight this monster in the beginning. This monster is designed to be unwinnable and will kill you. But then when you die, you basically gain ghost powers, and now that you have those ghost powers, you're powerful enough to take on the monster. That is an interesting plot development and does make this a rather unique scenario. I just don't know if I'm okay with the forced TPK at the beginning necessarily. But all those ghost powers should give the players enough oomph to be able to fight and defeat the Knight Fiend, including the fact that if they go down to 0 hit points, they still roll death saves, but if they get any successes, they immediately pop back up to 1 hit point, which is a huge boon for the players. Now, it does mention if they manage to get 3 fails, they are permanently destroyed. So hopefully they can be brought back up from there. They can't interact with physical objects technically as a ghost, but you can still... There's not really any... The thing is, there's not much to do outside of this very limited scope of events, which is... You go hunt down the Knight Fiend, it kills you, you come back as ghosts, you talk to Lady Wigand, and you go hunt the Knight Fiend again. It's all in this very small area as ghosts. So it's not like you have to do a whole bunch of ghost shit first. I would have even preferred to see just like a little side battle in there somewhere. Maybe you have to fight the other spirits with Lady Wigand for like a round or two, and then there's just too many coming, and she's like, okay, back off, go, just track down the Knight Fiend, I'll hold things off here. I think that would have added a lot to it. Instead, the players just go immediately towards the Knight Fiend and just have to fight the creature. And it's another big fight. But at this point, the players, with their ghost powers, mainly all their defensive capabilities, they should be able to defeat the Knight Fiend. And that's basically the whole thing. Once they defeat it, they kind of all... And they are supposed to, I guess, use... You don't have to use the sword, but it says the sword that they find, which is Lady Wigand's sword, in the Oni's body, original body, will start glowing and pulsing. It doesn't actually do any magical effects, except that the Oni has specifically vulnerability to that sword's damage. And I think there's a big misstep here in the conclusion, where the players, they wake up, days later after these events, because they pass out after they fight the boss, and they're in their own bodies, they've been healed up, everything's kind of, back to normal. And they find, they found the body of Lady Wigand, and they kind of rebury, I guess they didn't know about she was still out there or something. They bury the body, and one of the players who wielded the sword, hopefully somebody did, gets that sword back into their possession just magically. However, the sword is not magical at all. It's just a silvered longsword, so there's 2 big missteps here. One, we don't really get any kind of conclusion with Lady Wigand. Like, there should have at the very least been, like, she appears at the end and does a classic, like, thank you, now I can go, I can rest finally, or something. I feel like there should have been some kind of final conversation with her. And second of all, why not give the players a magic sword there? That's a very memorable way to get a sword. The sword that defeated this Oni and was maybe repowered up because it was able to destroy its spirit. Maybe give it some kind of, make it do more damage to ghosts or something. At least make it a goddamn +1 magic sword. Or you could even go even further and make it so that it's a sentient sword with her will inside of it or something. Like, that could have been cool. You could have really gone in a lot of different ways and made this a cool loot item. Instead, it specifically mentions there's not a whole lot of loot here. The woman who gave you the quest can't even give you anything because her husband was killed and she just has nothing now. You could have at least given the players this friggin' magic longsword, but instead it's kind of a miss there. And I just feel like that was a huge missed opportunity to give the players a cool, memorable item that was involved in the story, and instead it's just a silvered longsword. And that's pretty much it. It's, like I said, it's just barely over a dozen pages. Pretty much just features the Knight Fiend. I like that it tells a pretty clear story from beginning, middle, and end, despite being incredibly short. This really toes the line between what I would consider a mini adventure and an encounter. Because an encounter is just you meet enemies on the field or somebody and you do a thing. And this one is just a few more steps beyond that. Mainly the whole TPK thing, coming back as ghosts and all that. but it's still very small and localized in a single area, so it doesn't really feel like it's certainly not an Odyssey. Maybe it's an oddity, but it's a very, very small adventure. You'd be able to plop in somewhere, but the whole killing people killing the players in order to make this thing work is very, very tricky to pull off. Let's go over my pros and cons for the Knight Fiend of Ravenloft. Pros: I just mentioned it tells a satisfying story in a short amount of time, which is an impressive feat. There is a nice little background there. I like the Lady Wigand character, at least during the context of the story. The villain is pretty monstrous and evil and nasty, and it's a fun way, which goes into my other pro. It's a fun means of introducing a villain that the players cannot fight initially, but then they gain the means to fight them within a relatively short, self-contained adventure. Usually, that's something happens over the course of a campaign. You might fight a villain early. It's a very classic JRPG thing too. You fight a villain early. They kick your ass to prove what badass villains they are, and you go on this incredible journey for 20 or 30 hours, or 50 hours, whatever it is, and then you come back and you're high powered. Like, okay, now I can fight this enemy that wiped the floor with me early on. In this case, it condenses all of that into a very small space, and not an extreme level to where you're not getting wiped out maybe right off the bat, but you gain some new ghost powers that allow you to then defeat the villain. And then the third pro, it includes that creepy MP3, which I thought was a really nice addition and adds surprisingly a lot to this adventure. It's very well done, and it sets the mood very nicely, and I think that's a really creepy, cool nursery rhyme. Cons: the whole the forced TPK thing is a really tough thing for me to wrap my head around. I think it's a very tricky thing for a DM to pull off. Not that you necessarily shouldn't ever do it as a blanket rule, but it comes with a ton of caveats, and there's a lot of red flags there. It's not something I would necessarily feel comfortable with doing. Even capturing the players, I don't necessarily feel comfortable doing. And I got close running Tomb of Annihilation in the Fate of the Night Serpent event dungeon, that I still ended up backing off and saying I don't want to do this. So I don't know. Maybe some, you know your group the best. If that's something you feel like you can pull off versus something that would leave them very frustrated and irritated at you. I just wish that the designer had included some kind of alternative means. If they were like, if this really isn't going to work for you, allow your players to retreat. Maybe they talk to Lady Wigand and she says, because of the wounds you sustained or whatever, I can do this ritual, which will pull your spirits out of your body, like Hulk getting punched in Endgame and your spirit flies out, and then you can go fight. That way it's a player choice rather than forcing them into a death thing. It would have really gone a long way to include some kind of alternate means of doing that. Con: I do think the conclusion missed some meaningful story epilogue to Lady Wigand specifically, and I think it was a huge misstep to not include her sword as some kind of cool magic item that was either a reflection of her or a reflection of how it can kill this creature at the end, or maybe it deals like radiant damage or something. Why was this not a magic item? It seems like a pretty obvious fix to me. And then final con is no maps. No maps whatsoever. Could have been pretty easy because we could have used literally the same, like, was it a glade or a thicket or something it's mentioned? The Haunted Glade. Could have been a pretty simple, like, dark forest map. We could have repurposed that for several things. You could have just done basically the whole adventure just on just one map would have been fine, but we don't get any maps whatsoever. Final verdict: if you can get past purposefully wiping out the entire party with a single villain, the Knight Fiend of Ravenloft features a great opportunity to temporarily power up the PCs as they exact their heroic revenge. I did say heroic because they are still saving the little girl. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel, and you can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. Shoutouts to my platinum patrons: Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Manuel, Wizard, Princess, Christopher, Star Lovely, Thomas, Ian, Captain Mike, Jeremy, Adam, Leroy, and Goblin Works. And gold patrons: RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Marcos, David, Vicente, Gilberto, Dead Lizard, Lion, Sam, Ross, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Fatboy619, Scalia, Nick, Farty McButterpants, Blood Angel, Baroness, The Fireworks Factory, Baboon, Sean, A.K. Cert2B, and Nathan. Thank you all very much for your support.